If you haven't been here earlier, my name is Jamal, Dauda. I work for Blockchain Creative Labs, head up their creative strategy and lots of other weird things. I've been emceeing all day, but I actually get to have a real fireside chat with someone that I really look up to in this space and somebody who really defines what we've been talking about all day in terms of empowering communities, creators, really aligning incentives around what this space is about. I will start with a little bit of an intro. He is an incredible music producer, a DJ, a long time, longer than many of us, crypto and NFT builder in the space. Specifically, is a co-founder and CEO of a company called Royal, which focuses in specifically on music and using blockchain and NFTs to empower creators. And we'll talk a lot about Royal as well, but he's been on a pretty special journey, both as a creator himself and as a builder of this company. And I'm really excited to talk to him more about it. So if you will, please welcome Justin Blau, otherwise known as Blau. Hello,
dude.
sir.
Good to see you. Pleasure to be here.
It's so much easier just being able to like BS with one person than having to MC. I was MCing all day. It's like
MCing like with 5 people up here?
Yeah, it's a little bit different. It's
okay.
Like, this will be easy.
Awesome.
First off, how are you?
I'm good. This little chair thing is messing up my sneakers. No, I'm great. It's great to be here at South by. It's actually my first South by.
I was going to ask you, is it really?
It is, which is kind of crazy.
That is
I feel like I should have been here before.
I would say so. That's surprising, actually. You're probably playing a million other festivals or
yeah.
things.
In my previous pre-COVID life, there was always a city on a weekend that wasn't Austin. But now I find myself here very often because the offices for Royal are actually just 3 blocks away.
Wait, really?
Yeah.
I don't think I knew that, actually.
Yeah, we're on San Jacinto and 3rd.
Really bad fact checker. Didn't even look into that.
Good.
So for those who don't know you, I know this is always hard and very broad, but talk about yourself, but really, really your journey into NFTs. I think it's really fascinating. I think we always talk about how new we all are in this space, which means that we all had to come from somewhere else, right? And what I always love and why I was excited to talk to you is I come from a music background as well. I came from the management, record label side. You've come through, even before music, a little bit of a journey in business school. So talk about your kind of how you got here.
Yeah, I'll I guess start with the most consolidated version I can possibly give. I studied index derivatives and structured products in college, finance, and was always interested in the idea of banking the unbanked, giving banking access to people in the third world. All of that stuff was always kind of fascinating to me. I started a micro lending program when I was in high school. Just like that financial aspect of entrepreneurship and being able to finance entrepreneurs in general with micro lending was always something fascinating to me. So fast forward to college, my DJ career broke out thanks to YouTube and Facebook and SoundCloud, making mashups. I was lucky enough to play a lot of awesome shows around the world and happened to meet Tyler and Cameron Winklevoss in Mexico on spring break while opening up for Avicii. And that's when I discovered Bitcoin. It couldn't be more cliche. Were they playing?
Were they on spring break or were you on spring break?
I think we were all on spring break, I'll be honest.
Amazing.
But the most cliche Bitcoin story possible, in Puerto Vallarta, I discovered Bitcoin in 2014 and it rocked my world. And ever since then, have been quite excited about any type of decentralized ledger tech. Fast forward to 2017, I kind of got more deeply involved in the potential of decentralized applications on Ethereum. A lot of my friends from college ended up in tech. JD, my current co-founder, is one of those friends who, of course, started Open Door and many other awesome companies. Yes. And one of my college roommate was one of the first employees at Square. So I've kind of always had ties to the tech world, even though I was primarily based in music. And the idea of disintermediating an entire industry that has previously been, as you know, the famous statistic is 12% of all income in music goes to artists, 88% goes to everyone else.
Yep.
I mean, there's an entire world to disrupt there. And my thesis in 2017 was that distributed ledger tech would be the force to do that. So I started experimenting with NFTs in 2017. We built a music festival called Our Music Festival, where we experimented with some live claim applications, scan QR code, get a POAP with the festival app.
And so you were doing that back then?
In
That early
2018
on,
is, yeah, 2017, 2018.
amazing.
And one of the things I noticed back then, it was kind of during the crypto bear market, but the participation, 60% of the festival attendees for the festival that we threw ended up actually claiming some form of NFT or we had a fungible currency that you could spend on merch at the time. And so we built this thing and it was wildly successful, but it was still a little bit too early. So from 2018 till 2020, I really was less involved in the crypto space just as a passive investor, less as an active kind of creator or entrepreneur. Then COVID hits. Performances, my life of 10 years of touring as a DJ changes. I've always had the fascination with crypto. I start yield farming. I start, diving pretty deep in the DeFi ecosystem.
Yep.
A lot of my friends that I made through my journeys in crypto were pretty hardcore in DeFi land, DeFi degenning in 2020 over the summer. And that's when I started seeing NFTs begin to resurface with this new manifestation, which was digital art. And so you had artists that I'm sure many of you here might be familiar with, Pac, Hackatao, Xcopy, and Trevor Jones. Trevor Jones was doing digital art since 2015 with certificates of authenticity built on Bitcoin. And you had all these amazing visual artists experimenting with this technology, but I never really knew how it would apply outside of this kind of visual medium. And so I said to myself in the summer of 2020, I don't know if people are going to care about music and unique tokens yet. So I'm going to team up with my art director, who does all my artwork for Blau, Slime Sunday. We're going to create
who's a genius.
True genius.
Love
if you guys
Mike.
don't know his work, definitely check out Slime Sunday on Instagram.
He's incredible.
An incredible artist. And he's been my art director for 6 years. So we started making audio-visual loops with unreleased music. And we were selling it for $150. And everyone was buying it. And it was just crazy, right? Like it was it was totally an experiment. I had no idea how it would work. And it started snowballing from the summer of 2020 into February of last year, almost exactly a year ago, when I did this auction on my website that was at the time the highest NFT sale. Follow up with Beeple 3 weeks later with his $69 million auction, and the whole world was ready to explore this technology. And let's be honest, as much as I had been experimenting in this for a while, money does talk and money does convince people to get involved. And when people started seeing these crazy numbers, they're like, maybe there's something here. Maybe I should dive a little bit deeper and understand why this idea of digital ownership is so powerful in a world where digital creators have been, misvalued for a decade at least, right? Like every Web2 platform monetizes on the backs of content creators through advertising revenue, and those creators are doing it just for followers to maybe get a brand deal, right? Whether it's a musician or a visual artist. And so the first manifestation of NFTs that really made sense was visual art. And then everybody started to realize, well, there's probably a form factor for unique digital assets as it applies to every single type of media content.
Right.
And that's what we've seen for the past year. Everyone from the Web 2 world getting really excited about what's possible in Web 3 and starting to innovate and experiment. And you have some of the brightest minds in the world that are starting to work on this stuff now.
Talk's over. Nothing better that I have to add than that.
That's the quickest story I could give for background.
No, but that's great. You race through a lot of things though that are like pretty monumental. I know you would never say this about yourself, but again, we talk about the Beeple sale, but that, your sale at the time was like a really pivotal, a lot of people stood up and said wait a minute, there's something that's not just this sort of niche Reddit backroom kind of use of this. People started really rethinking how multimedia was being distributed. I had people at film studios and TV and stuff hitting me freaking out after that sale.
It was a moment. We had the expectation. So I studied, economics and all these financial instruments in college. And I had this thesis at the time. I said, well, with a unique piece of physical art, there can only be one winner. But with something digital, you can at least create scarcity among a small group and capture the entire demand curve. So we created the ranked auction on my website. I didn't want to do it through a third party. A company I invested in built the actual tech. I kind of PM'd the project, even though I've never been a PM before. And we expected, maybe 50 grand, $100,000, maybe, if we were lucky. It was on my website. I didn't have the audience of an existing platform and all those email addresses of collectors and whatnot.
Right.
And this thing exploded. It was just organic nature of capturing lightning in the bottle. We had zero expectation. of course, that did 11.7 million. And after that moment, it was kind of like, okay, what's next? And I was honest with everybody, and I said, collectible music is interesting, but there's no enforcement really on the scarcity the same way there is to an extent with visual art, right? You have cause and visual artists that do prints,
right,
and they're very good at holding back, quantity,
right,
for the purpose of brand.
right,
But with just digital music, it's kind of hard because the form factor is similar across Spotify or across an MP3 file hosted on IPFS.
right.
It's the same consumption layer. There's no difference in the content, and it's invisible. Whereas a profile picture, you can signal to the rest of the world, hey, I own this Bored Ape. Hey, I own this CryptoPunk, right?
Right.
It's way easier to show the world that you own something like that. So I thought to myself, what really is the future of music? Well, it's probably true ownership of copyright. How the fuck are we going to do that? And that was the beginning of Royal. And so I talked to JD, who's my friend of 12 years, who's built many companies before. I talked to Fred Arzum, who started Coinbase, who's been a good friend of mine for 5 years.
Awesome.
And Keith Raboy, who started Open Door with JD and was one of the earlier investors in a lot of different protocols and crypto products. And we kind of all huddled together and said, is this possible? Can we do this? And as friends, we determined that it was possible. Fred and Paradigm, and Keith at Founders Fund funded our seed round, and we started building. And I started coming to Austin to visit JD because he's based here.
There you go.
I'm based in Vegas, and I go back and forth now.
There we go. And Royal was born.
Royal was born.
You've given me a perfect setup and segue to Royal. Let's talk about that a little bit, and talk about it broadly, but also talk about. I think you've hit on it a little bit, but what were all of you trying to solve with Royal, and how has that affected the approach that you've taken? Because your point, kind of in crypto Twitter and everywhere else where we all congregate, Discord and everywhere else, people were taking a lot of different approaches to music NFTs, but you guys have taken a very specific, targeted, thoughtful approach that so far feels like it's really leading the pack. Explain what you're trying to solve for and why that approach.
So I guess from my experience, the idea of collectible music, collecting music has always been prominent, right? Even in the vinyl days and in the CD days. I had, I'm 31, so a little past the vinyl days, but I did have my, jewel case of CDs that I burn mixes for friends.
Oh,
right?
yeah, those big ugly black cases, full burn CDs. Woo!
But dude, I would pirate that shit. I'm not gonna lie, I would pirate it, and the Pirate Bay or what's that .cd or any of those torrenting sites.
LimeWire, which you see they're coming back.
LimeWire, I saw that
as like an NFT.
I have some
thing?
context on that. Yeah, I think they're doing. LimeWire is doing everything, not just music. I think that's what I heard. But
interesting.
The idea of collectible music is interesting, but the consumption layer will never be anything related to Web3, unless it's Audius is the one exception to that rule, and I've been involved with those guys for 4 years, and that's a whole separate conversation. But are you really going to listen to a song in your wallet? I don't think so.
Yeah, why?
I don't think that's the right form factor. So then what does music ownership mean? Well, maybe it means owning a piece of the copyright. Why is that interesting? Because now you are actually aligned incentive-wise with your favorite artists. You're no longer in this one-way consumption business model.
Right.
You're now a partner. And what I mean by one-way consumption is that the demand curve for music has always been flat. There are 4 ways that you can engage with your favorite artist. You can pay for a Spotify subscription for $9.99, and then they get a portion of the income, which, by the way, we'll get there, but Spotify actually does pay artists, the biggest misconception, I think, in the world, and we'll get there in a second. You can pay for a 99-cent license on iTunes. You can pay to see a performance, which is geographically limited, depending on your location in the world.
Yep.
Or you can buy a piece of merch, which, to be honest, conversion for merch is 90% higher in a live setting than online.
Right.
Unless you're, a ginormous artist like A$AP Rocky or something.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
So the demand curve is flat. How do you capture all the emotional value that music creates in our lives? Because let's be honest, it isn't a third of a cent per stream, right? It's way greater. But how do you do that in such a way where now those fans are actually financially aligned with their favorite artist? How much more likely is a fan to scream atop the mountains about their favorite artist when they own a piece of the song?
Exactly.
Now that ownership today only exists from a streaming Web 2 standpoint, but as different types of monetization migrate into Web 3, when you own a piece of a copyright, you're entitled to all the income associated with that into the future, no matter what the manifestation of the audio is. So now, the thesis for Royal is your fans can be your record label. Or, in many ways, they can be a partner to the record label that has signed you. A lot of people think of music in Web3 as like this anti-record label thing. Record labels still provide a lot of services for artists. We don't think record labels are at all an enemy. I've worked with many labels and have had great experiences. The enemy of Royal is the bad deal, not the record label.
Yeah.
And sometimes the bad deal happens, and we want to provide artists with an alternative to that bad deal.
That's an amazing distinction. And I think that's really, really, really important because I think it's so easy to make it seem binary, where it's sort of like this new technology. And you've said two things we talked about all day, which is this alignment of incentives, which is a huge shift, not just technologically, but culturally, right? Like it's now what you expect. Before, guys like you and I, being the biggest fan of Radiohead, just meant it was bragging rights.
Did you just pull that? Did you just pull that because I'm like the biggest Radiohead fan in the world? Or
yeah, of course.
Was that by chance?
No, that was good research. Come on, that was like I know what I'm doing here. Come on, I know some people in your life. No, but when we were big like Tom York and Radiohead fans, it was just being the coolest guy in the room. But do you imagine now if you and I shared 1% of Kid A, running how much more we would have been more insufferable than we were at 16 and 17 talking about, right?
And there are two artists, or I would even say two artists that I would have invested in as an artist, right? Like it's not just a fan-artist relationship.
Right, exactly.
It's an artist-to-artist relationship. Co-signing has been such a ginormous part of music culture.
Exactly.
And I'll take a little bit of credit. The Chainsmokers opened for me on tour back in the day, who are now investors in the company.
Yep.
And Millennium opened for me back in the day, who's now an investor in the company, right?
Yep.
If I could have invested in them back then, of course I would have.
Yeah, you'd be on an island somewhere. I wouldn't even be sitting here.
I really do think that for Royal is definitely just a passion project of JD and mine. JD started a lot of awesome companies. I love making music, and I still do that on the weekends. But I really want to give the next generation of artists the tools I didn't have when I started, because it was an uphill battle. Being an independent artist is an uphill battle.
Yes.
It's frustrating. It's stressful. It takes you away from the creativity.
Right.
So if we can do that for the next generation of artists, fuck yeah, right?
Yeah.
But that's 100% right. Aligning financial incentives between artists and fans is something that hasn't happened before. And if you think about it, most asset classes are accessible by the public in some way, shape, or form. IP just happens to not be one of them.
Right.
So who's investing in music today? Record labels and hedge funds, private equity funds.
Yep.
But who touches music with the most depth? The masses. Why not give the masses access to a new asset class? It seems kind of obvious.
You would think.
The reason why it's difficult is the execution, right? And so that's why at Royal we've hired, incredible people to help us execute on that goal.
The execution, and to your point, we talked about it in a panel earlier. I think, when we talk about, as Blockchain Creative Labs, and Web3, it's an evolution of a build that's been happening through Web 1 and Web 2. I think there's always this fear with like great innovation of any kind, digital, cultural, that there will be a group that gets left behind, right? Or left out. And there are people who are incentivized either implicitly or explicitly to sort of push back against that change. We see that all the time, right? Post one thing about, NFTs and half your music fans are obsessed with it. The other half are yelling at you about
the environment.
Should
we talk
anything.
about? Should we do the 5-second the pitch that all of you should make to all of your friends on the environment argument? And I am extremely, I would say very pro environmental consciousness. The actual technical reason why NFTs don't affect anything related to emissions is that Ethereum and Bitcoin and every other blockchain requires, proof of work consensus mechanisms, which requires energy emission to mine blocks, computer power. But blocks will be mined, right? Transactions will be confirmed whether or not NFTs are included in that transaction.
Correct.
So there's no marginal increase in energy consumption. Right. It actually is just more expensive to mint. So you just have to pay a higher price to be included in a crowded block.
Right.
If you want to mint or transfer an NFT. The actual existence of NFTs or the creation doesn't change how many blocks are being mined. So the environmental argument on, crypto generally creating emissions is somewhat true.
Sure. Talking
Though
about, like, chains at
minuscule
large.
relative to the banking system, which we don't need to get there.
into that,
but
but
the
yeah.
actual existence of every marginal NFT doesn't change the amount of emissions that exist, because blocks will be mined anyway with other types of transactions. So for everyone in the room, that's the highly technical answer.
That's what you got to do. So when your parents ask you why you're destroying the earth with NFTs, you're like, Mom, Dad, I'm not. This is what you just replicate that or show the video of
blocks
that.
will be mined anyway.
Anyway, the blocks will be mined. But no, it's a great talk that we always have, and that's it in a nutshell. Speaking of which, I'm gonna play my favorite game.
Sorry to get sidetracked there.
No, that was a great one. I loved it. I'm going to read a tweet of yours.
Oh boy.
Yeah, could be anything. You don't know which one it is, do you?
How deep are we going back?
No, I think last couple weeks. Not that bad. But it's an important one. You tweeted, utility can be manifested in pure pride of ownership. My one of one G-Monk, which for those who don't know, another amazing artist, having a one of one is pretty sweet, has been my iPhone background since I bought it. It makes me happy every day. I read that because when I was first getting into the space and I was learning from people like you and Slime Sunday and other amazing people in this space, it felt like there was this real like joy and ethos in art, and there was this connectivity to the art. I feel like in some of the places we've been looking at NFTs and some of the other spaces, there's this expectation of utility. That's always the word that gets thrown around. When people think through utility, whether it's an artist in the space, whether it's a new brand emerging like a Bored Apes or Doodles or a Cool Cat, how are we thinking about utility in the right and wrong ways, would you say?
So utility is kind of the wrong word, but it's caught on.
Right. I would agree with that.
I'm kind of a crazy etymological nerd, but utility just means useful, and useful is subjective. Right? So the value propositions of digital ownership, let's call it, whether it's NFT or not, the value propositions of digital ownership are kind of threefold. There's the innate pride of ownership, there's the social signal, and then in the case of Royal, there's the actual economic participation component. So those are the three kind of main variables. Let's apply that to something that isn't an NFT. My favorite example is a Rolex, okay? You buy, and by the way, I don't own any fancy watches. I like cars more than watches. I imagine, and I have my friend Sam Harrison, who's a very dear friend of mine who's been in crypto for a very long time. He loves watches. He loves collecting them. He has pride when he goes to buy a new watch. He gets the social signal of when it exists in a social setting. And there is also the economic incentive of the fact that this may appreciate in value because it's scarce. Right. And watches have outperformed many other asset classes. If you look at the stats, it's pretty wild, right? Yeah. So those are the three value propositions as they apply in the physical world that can easily be translated to the digital world, right? I'm proud to own this CryptoPunk. It's my profile picture. But now the difference between the punk and the watch is the audience of viewership is way larger, right? I could drive whatever fancy car I have in Las Vegas. Only people that see me in person are going to know that. Right. My profile picture online, the whole world knows that I own this asset. Yeah. And so that's a really unique, that's kind of the combination of innate pride of ownership and social signaling that NFTs and digital assets unlock in a completely new way. And people are starting to realize, like the G-Monk example that you gave, when somebody asks me about my iPhone background, I get to say I own it. It's not just a cool picture I found on the internet.
Right.
I own it. And I'm the only person that owns this, that has the authentication from the artist himself, G-Monk, that like this is the original copy. And the more that copy is shared, the more valuable that one of one is, right? Because more people have seen it. So it's this audience of viewership versus scarcity thing that I think people are starting to wrap their head around a little bit more. At Royal, we kind of take this a step further with real copyright ownership, right? And that's what we believe is the next step. But to give you an example of apes, I think is a great example. The day before the original ape mint, my friend Ben calls me. He's like, Justin, everything you've been talking about with IP ownership, these guys are doing it. I was like, that's amazing. This was right in the early stages of us manifesting the ideas for Royal. And so, I went and I minted 33 Bored Apes. I'm like, this is the future.
Yeah.
I was right. I'm gonna say no, but I mean I'm not right all the time. But that was one where I was like, holy shit, IP manifestation in the token world is probably where it's going.
Yeah.
Collectibles are cool, ownership is cooler. And we throw around this idea of ownership a little bit too much. We assume that ownership exists from owning a token, but a token is really just a cryptographic data point. That's all it is. An NFT is not the image, it's not the media file.
I was gonna say, will you explain this? Because this is a huge and a very common misconception that happens a lot with like NFTs and tokenization and what you get when you get the token. Like, you actually, this is another tweet of yours that I love, where you like run. Yeah,
thanks.
But will you? Will you explain it though? Like, because I think it's important to know.
It is important. So, like, when you think about wallets and tokens in general, right? You have this distributed ledger that is decentralized in the case of Ethereum, and I'm talking about Ethereum specifically. You can have a number of different token types. Each token standard has a different method of storage of data, where you've got an ERC721, which is a traditional NFT, with the address in the left column, or sorry, the token ID in the left column of the data storage, and the wallet address on the right column. Right? So token ID 1 through 10,000 for apes, and there can only be one address that owns that token ID. Then you have 1155, where the address is on the left column and the quantity is on the right. So you have this option to create multiple different pieces of metadata associated with different, token numbers, but each address can own multiple. So it's kind of this really interesting hybrid.
Yeah.
And an 1155 minting contract can theoretically issue both fungible and non-fungible tokens.
Right. Get into batch mints.
And then, of course, you have ERC20, which is fungible.
Right.
Which is simply column for quantity, column for address, and then up to however many decimals the contract allows, right? So all an NFT is literally a point of data. Then the NFT that's in your wallet is actually not where the information is coming from. So if you pull up Etherscan, for instance, and you're looking at your wallet, you see you have one, Bored Ape. The data for that is actually set up in the actual smart contract, the minting contract. And the minting contract points to metadata that points to the images of the apes. Now, that metadata is really the core of everything that happens with NFTs. And that metadata can be sometimes updated.
Exactly.
It can sometimes be printed on-chain with SVG files, which is what POC does. And there's all these crazy different technical methods of using it. In the end, an NFT is just a certificate of authenticity. It is not the image. It is not the media file. It just points to it. And where it's hosted, it could be hosted anywhere. Shit, it could be Spotify.
Yeah.
It could be.
Private
but that doesn't mean that
nodes.
Spotify actually agrees that this is the official ownership of the thing. But you can, as a developer, I can point the metadata of an NFT to anything I want to.
Yeah, and I say that it's a hugely important distinction, and that I think it's to truly understand like what's happening in these spaces and what they're kind of I don't want to say the risks, but the responsibilities of sort of doing that research, understanding what you're purchasing, where it's hosted, like getting people to go that next level down, because people were buying things, again, this goes back to utility, right? With expectations of, I own this, I can exploit it in this way, it'll always be there. All these things where, to your point,
and permanence is a whole other question.
Permanence is a whole different thing.
But what CryptoPunks did, which is so special, and most people don't necessarily know this, the actual metadata didn't point. There was no metadata that pointed to the image of 10,000 CryptoPunks. They actually just hashed it, and I might lose some people here. Sorry. Basically, if you could recreate a hash of the original CryptoPunk image to prove that the contract was actually, real, it was like a cryptographic way of representing an image without hosting it on a decentralized web portal or, Arweave, IPFS, or SVG, on-chain, any of that. So CryptoPunks were really, to me, are the most special because they're the first instance of cryptographic visual representation. But just as you said, utility is subjective. And a lot of the utility that the media talks about is barely attainable today yet. I think a lot of it's coming. I envision a world where your ticket, you can connect your wallet to your phone in advance without revealing your private key with technology called zero knowledge proofs, or like this protocol called ZK Sync. And then just like you have your Authy, your two-factor authentication to get into any exchange, when your wallet's connected, it's updating that QR code, and that gets you into a venue, or that gets you into the Doodles event later. That stuff's not quite ready yet, but it's coming. It's happening really quickly. So utility is this word we throw around a lot. Most of it hasn't been unlocked yet. But there is still the utility of just pride, right?
Yeah.
The excitement that you get out of owning art. And back in my house in Vegas, I have tons of screens all over my walls with lots of art, and it makes me happy. And ultimately, that's why you should buy something.
Yeah, I mean, you stole my thunder because that was the question I was going to ask you.
Oh, what was the next one?
No, I'm joking. But outside of all of this, I think, like you said, I feel like people and that we know, and we share some friends that, and we talk about how I think a lot of people ask about why are you so certain that blockchain and Web3 is the future in this, and what I always say is that like I'm not certain. I don't think we're there yet. To your point, I don't think we've unlocked it. I think what we're all trying to do now, the discovery and innovation we're working through, is the thing. This isn't the thing, but hopefully it's the thing that gets us to the thing. And I think that's what you were just touching on, right? And so to that end, and what I want to maybe wrap up with, depending on time.
Yeah.
What are you seeing just generally in the space, or where are you focusing? Because I mean, you've been light years ahead now for the last for years and years.
There was a lot of time that I didn't think that way. I'll be honest. It's been a wild year. I have to say the past 12 months have been absolutely insane, and I think that my favorite moments are when it really clicks for someone. It takes a second, but like my dad, when it clicked for him, I was so happy. I was literally over the moon. And now he owns a couple mutant apes, which is amazing.
What did it take for it to click for him? What was that moment where he went, "Oh, I get what this is. It's like having a."
It's all about the analog example that relates to the person. So with my mom, I used the Birkin bag, right?
Fair.
With my dad, I used I don't what was the first? I think it was I think it was Ferraris. So like Ferrari's shipping and delivery and allocation structure is like fascinating. They're the only company that's been able to keep up this crazy, like, you have to buy 5 to get the rarest one, and we have you in our system, and if you do something wrong, then we're never going to let you buy a new one again. It's like this idea of exclusivity manifesting in a digital way, right? And there's lots of examples, whether it's the watch, it's the Birkin, it's the Ferrari allocation, let alone the Ferrari itself, right? It's the ability to buy it.
Yep.
That's what's so special, is non-fungible tokens unlock this entire world of access and ownership in the digital world. And we kind of forget sometimes how much value we actually do extract from the digital world. I mean, how much time are we spending on our phones?
Too much.
Probably too much. But we're getting value out of all of those experiences.
Yeah.
All the things we scroll by on Instagram, right? And so at least for Royal, my vision of the future is a world where you're in a coffee shop. And I remember I discovered Tame Impala at a coffee shop a long time ago. And I just fell in love with the music from Shazam. And my vision of the future is like, you Shazam a song, you could throw $10 into it in the moment. Because you see maybe there's low streams. You throw $10 into the song, you tell your friends about it. Maybe that $10 is 30 in a couple of weeks because it's more popular. Maybe the thing explodes. But how do you tie intrinsic value to that as opposed to just collectible value to that? Right. Through ownership of some form of copyright, right? And what's interesting about IP is it's quite distinct from LLCs, right? IP is not treated in the same way limited liability companies or corporations are.
Not at all.
And so it creates this incredible loop where we're going to see this technology apply to every single media type over the next 10 years. And I think everybody's kind of figured it out for visual art and for identity.
Yeah.
But there's film, there's gaming, and the Axie guys, and there's a lot of and the Gala Games guys.
Right.
I mean, these are people that are really innovating and at the forefront. But we're just scratching the surface of what will be a decade-long journey, and it's just exciting that this is, to me at least, this is truly year one. This is the year that the world knows. The world knows, and people are building.
That's what we're doing here. Well, I could talk to you forever, sir, but we got to go do some other stuff.
Yes, sir.
I'll see you tomorrow night here DJing.
I'm playing back there.
It
looks pretty dope.
So if you want to, thank you so much, man.
Thank you, sir.
Amazing to talk to you every time.
Great
Learn something
questions.
new. I'm just I'm here to help. And thank you all so much for hanging out with us. Justin Blau, everyone.
Awesome. Thank you.